Types of reproduction. In this lesson, you will develop models to describe the similarities and differences between asexual and sexual reproduction.
Cell division, lesson activity, cell division, asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, another activity, reproduction, sexual reproduction continued.
Warm up. Open the notebook tool and answer these questions. Nancy observed that her plant reproduced when she cut off a leaf and planted it. Over time, the leaf grew into a full-grown plant. How is this offspring plant different from a plant that reproduces when one plant pollinates another? Explain your answer. Kevin has learned about planarians, which are a species of flatworm. Some of these worms have two methods of reproduction. A planarian can produce new offspring by splitting itself and growing new body parts on each portion, or it can mate with another planarian to produce offspring. Kevin believes that both methods of reproduction will produce offspring that are genetically identical to the parent. Do you agree? Explain your answer.
Hi, I'm Brianna Glover. I'm a conservation specialist. My job is to work with different types of plants. When I work in the greenhouse, I learn a lot about plants. Through my research, I try to understand their reproduction methods and the conditions they need for growth. I'm amazed when I see that different plants have different methods of reproduction. Some of them reproduce in more than one way. Isn't that fascinating? If you love strawberries, you'd be amazed to know that a strawberry plant can reproduce in two ways. The wild plant and the garden variety can pollinate with another flower of its kind. They produce a new plant whose genetic material will resemble that of the parents. A strawberry plant can also produce clones or replicas of itself from its own stem. The stem forms a branch-like structure with buds on it. Under suitable conditions, these buds grow into new plants. Interestingly, these methods of reproduction yield different kinds of offspring. Let's look at the types of reproduction and their advantages and disadvantages.
Cell division. Cell division is the process in which a cell divides itself to form two new, identical cells. Cell division helps maintain the constant number of cells the body requires. It helps with tissue growth, making us grow tall. Cell division helps repair injured and worn-out tissues, and also aids in reproduction. Let's look at the process in which cell division creates identical twins.
In the lesson on slide 9, it says cell division, and then it says watch this video about how cell division works. Now, I've tried playing these videos before. YouTube usually requires me to edit them out. So if you need to watch this video, go to your tutorial, go to slide 9, and click on the link.
Let's see how human life originates in the mother's body. The place where a fetus grows is called a womb. On either side of the womb there is a fallopian tube where the life begins. Underneath the fallopian tubes is an ovary from which a human egg called ovum, measuring around 0.1 millimeters, is produced once a month. The egg which is released gets sucked into the fallopian tube. This is where the egg and sperm meet. Let's look at the moment they meet. one of the sperm breaks the eggshell and goes inside. This is fertilization. A new life starts to grow inside the mother's womb. The fertilized egg slowly moves towards the womb and stays there to grow until it is ready for birth.
The video started with a fertilized cell. The cell divides, cells divide again and again to form a larger ball of cells, which is eventually planted in the womb to grow into a child. The cells must continue to divide so that the baby grows. Do you think cell division stops after a baby is born? Why or why not? No, I do not. Cell division still needs to happen to allow the baby to grow taller and develop the features of an adult human. A baby receives half of its genes from the mother and half from the father when the sperm and egg join to make a fertilized egg, or a zygote. Identical twins form when a fertilized egg splits into two separate life forms. Using what you learned in the video, draw a model that shows clearly how cell division forms identical twins. I will not be drawing a model, I will explain. So you have the cells, they divide and divide, and then that cell, or that group of cells, divides and splits into two separate cells, not a, growing single. Fraternal twins are formed when two different sperm fertilize two different eggs. How do you think physical characteristics such as hair color or facial features differ in fraternal twins compared to identical twins? How does the way each type of twin develop contribute to these differences? Identical twins have the same physical features such as hair color and eye color because they were formed from the exact same egg and sperm. Fraternal twins are formed from two different eggs and sperm, so those twins look different from each other.
Mitosis. Cell division is essential for the growth of tissues and organs. For cells to divide, they must undergo a process called mitosis. In the activity, we learn that life starts as a single fertilized egg. The egg undergoes mitosis an uncountable number of times to form new cells. These cells then form an organism. During mitosis, the genetic material, or genes, of the cell divides in equal proportion to form two new cells. Mitosis starts with only one cell that divides into two daughter cells. There are different phases in a cell cycle: interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and cytokinesis. Interphase. On receiving the chemical stimulus for cell division, the cell enters interphase. During this phase, the cell spends most of its time readying itself for its division. The cell undergoes rapid maximum growth during interphase. It replicates its DNA too. DNA is an abbreviation for deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA contains all the genetic information that carries the instructions for the body's functions and characteristics. Interphase consists of three stages: G1, S, and G2. Let's take a closer look at these stages. The G1 stage. The cell grows larger and performs normal functions. It produces the enzymes necessary for the duplication of DNA. This stage is a time of rapid growth and development. The S stage. The cell continues to grow. It also starts creating a copy of the genetic material, DNA. The DNA must be duplicated so that when the cell divides, each daughter cell receives the same amount of genetic material. The G2 stage. The daughter cells require organelles to perform their normal functions, so the parent cell makes copies of all its organelles. When the cell divides, the new cells have all the organelles they need to survive. Metaphase. The chromosomes formed in prophase align in the middle of the cell. This phase is short.
Sorry, the only way to show the highlighted sections is to have moved from this tab to this tab. This tab here is prophase. The second tab over is metaphase. So let me read prophase. If I push back button, I might lose these, so let's not do that. Prophase. Prophase is the first step in mitosis. The DNA replicated during the S stage now takes the coiled form of chromosomes. Each chromosome has two arms, which are the chromatids. They are connected in the center by centromere. Then the nuclear membrane breaks and spindle fibers form in the cytoplasm. So interphase, prophase, metaphase. I will click back and see if interphase was described, but I think we just described that. So describe what I just said. Metaphase. The chromosomes formed in prophase align in the middle of the cell.
To ensure that the daughter cells receive all the genetic material they need to function, it's important that the chromosomes line up properly on the spindle fiber. Telophase. During telophase, nuclear membrane
happened again. Anaphase. The chromosomes separate during anaphase. The spindle fibers pull apart the chromatids. Each half of the chromatid goes into the budding daughter cell. The cell grows in length, preparing itself for division. Telophase. During telophase, nuclear membranes form around the newly separated chromatin. The chromosomes relax and form chromatin fibers. The spindle fibers disappear. The nuclei of the daughter cells start to develop. The cell membrane also starts to pinch inward at the middle of the cell. Cytokinesis. Cytokinesis is the last phase of mitosis, when the cell actually splits into two daughter cells. The membrane that covers the cell and the cytoplasm divide into two. The cytoplasm divides at the same time, which is how the phase got its name. Kinesis, which means division, comes from the Greek and Latin words for move. In animal cells, the plasma membrane pinches down the middle of the cell and forms two new cells. Plants have an additional covering called a cell wall. The cell wall is formed in the middle of the dividing cells, so two new cells are formed. Type your response in the box. Your teacher asks you to model the phases of mitosis using a cheese pizza. You may use other toppings or kitchen tools to develop your model. Describe how you'd model each phase of mitosis using the pizza as a base. Interphase. Add mushrooms to represent organelles and a ring of pepperoni to make a nuclear membrane. Strips of peppers would represent the DNA inside the nucleus. To model the end of interphase, double the number of mushrooms on the pizza to indicate the copying of the organelles. Double the number of peppers inside the nucleus to represent the replication of DNA. Prophase. Pair strips of pepper inside the nucleus to show that formation of chromosome pairs, strips of aluminum foil, would represent spindle fibers. Metaphase. Line up the pair of peppers along the middle of the pizza. Sounds like a tongue twister. Put the pepperoni and peppers on the middle of the pizza, perfectly paired. Okay. Anyways, I'll continue. Removing the pepperoni would show the breakdown of the nuclear membrane. Anaphase. Split up the pairs of peppers and show the spindle fibers made of aluminum foil, pulling them to either side of the cell. Telophase. Make two new nuclear membranes around the pepper strips using pepperoni. Separate the pairs of peppers to show the chromosomes unwinding. Cytokinesis. Cut the pizza across the middle to show the cell dividing into two daughter cells. Thought I skipped ahead. Here we go.
Asexual reproduction. Reproduction is the process of producing offspring. Reproduction often involves two parents, but some species can reproduce using only one parent. This type of reproduction is called asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, the single parent copies its genetic material and transfers it to the offspring. The offspring is genetically identical to the parent. Let's look at the types of asexual reproduction. Mitosis and binary fission. We've learned that cells divide by the process of mitosis. Mitosis is the division of the nuclear material and cytoplasm of the cell. All eukaryotic organisms, whether single-celled or multicelled, undergo mitosis. Bacteria are prokaryotes, which lack nuclei. Bacteria reproduce through a process known as binary fission. Binary fission is a simple form of reproduction where a bacterium copies its DNA. Then it elongates and pulls the DNA copies toward the opposite ends of the cell. The cell membrane then pinches in, just like in mitosis, forming two new cells. Vegetative reproduction. In more complicated organisms, mitosis helps a developing offspring to grow larger. In asexual reproduction, a single parent clones itself and the offspring grows through mitosis. Gardeners use a technique to grow plants, in which they cut a leaf or stem from an existing plant and put it in soil or water. This leaf or stem grows into a new plant that's genetically similar to the parent plant. Even in household gardens, it's a common practice to use leaf or stem cuttings to generate new plants. Producing a plant this way is an example of asexual reproduction. Some plants, such as strawberry plants, produce runners that grow along the ground. These runners eventually produce new plants. Some organisms are capable of regrowing certain body parts. For example, if a lizard loses its tail, it can regrow its tail in a
I think this is one of those where I have to read this part because of the tabs. Budding and regeneration. Budding is another method of asexual reproduction. Some animals, such as hydras, reproduce by growing buds on their bodies. A hydra can grow a new organism on itself through mitosis. When the new hydra grows to a size that can survive on its own, it breaks off from the parent hydra. It's now ready to produce offspring of its own through the process of budding. Some organisms are capable of regrowing certain body parts.
Few days. This process of regrowing is also called regeneration. Certain organisms can reproduce through regeneration. These organisms form offspring by breaking off a limb or splitting into half. An example of a regenerating organism is the sea star, or starfish. Open the notebook tool and review your answer to this question from the warm-up. Nancy observed that her plant reproduced when she cut off a leaf and planted it. Over time, the leaf grew into a full-grown plant. How is this offspring plant different from a plant that reproduces when one plant pollinates another? Using what you've
So you should be able to discern at this point that the new plant would be that's right, identical replica of the parent plant.
Sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves two parents creating an offspring. Let's look at the differences between asexual and sexual reproduction with the help of planarians, a species of flatworm.
So process 1, planaria, it divides into two genetically similar individuals, versus process 2, because it has two different methods. It can also reproduce by having two separate organisms, not one that splits, but two separate. They fertilize an egg, the zygote develops into two genetically different individuals, or a genetically individual, assuming that it does twice.
Meiosis. Sexual reproduction involves two parents, so the genetic composition of the offspring is a mix of the characteristics received from each of the parents. We might tell our friends that they have their mom's eyes or their dad's nose, but our friends don't look exactly like their parents. They are a unique genetic blend of traits from both parents. Mitosis is a cell division process that results in the formation of two identical cells. In organisms that reproduce sexually, this process is common for cell division, growth, multiplication, and replacement. The production of sperm and eggs, the cells used in sexual reproduction, requires another type of cell division, meiosis. In meiosis, the germ cell, a cell that makes sperm and eggs, copies its genetic material. It splits into 4 identical sperm or eggs, also called gamete cells. Each gamete contains half the genetic information of the parent cell. Sexual reproduction requires 2 parents, a male that provides a sperm and a female that provides an egg. Each of these cells contribute half of the genetic material they receive from the parent to the offspring. The 2 cells combine to form a zygote, with the exact number of chromosomes for that particular species. For example, humans have 46 chromosomes in the germ cell. So each sperm cell and each egg cell has 23 chromosomes. When they combine to form a zygote, the zygote will have 46 chromosomes. This zygote then divides by mitosis and develops into a full-grown human being.
So you've got your female, your male, the egg, the sperm. They come together, they fertilize, growing into a zygote. The zygote grows into an embryo. Notice 23 chromosomes from the egg, 23 from the sperm. Now we have 46, and they are in 23 pairs. The embryo now has 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs.
Many of the phases in meiosis are similar to the phases in mitosis. In mitosis, the nucleus and cytoplasm divide only once. In meiosis, there are 2 divisions, meiosis I and meiosis II. Mitosis results in the production of diploid cells. A diploid cell has the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. Meiosis, on the other hand, involves the formation of haploid cells. A haploid cell has half the number of chromosomes as a parent cell of that particular species. So a mitotic division leads to 2 N cells, where 2N is the number of chromosomes for the species. On the other hand, meiosis leads to N cells. Meiosis I. In meiosis, germ cells go through a preparatory phase similar to interphase in mitosis. In this phase, the cells grow and copy their chromosomes. Prophase 1. The copied chromosomes condense. Chromosomes with the same genes in the same order are homologous chromosomes. They come together to form pairs. The nuclear membrane disappears. Metaphase 1. The homologous chromosomes attach themselves to the spindle fibers and line up in the middle of the cell. Anaphase 1. The chromosome pairs separate. The spindle fibers drag them to opposite ends of the cell. Telophase 1. The nuclear membrane forms around the newly duplicated chromosomes. After telophase, cytokinesis takes place. In this phase, the sister chromatids remain together. Meiosis 2. The two cells formed during meiosis 1 undergo a second division known as meiosis 2. These stages represent meiosis 2. Prophase 2. The replicated chromosomes remain condensed as sister chromatids. The nuclear membrane breaks down. Metaphase 2. Sister chromatids align in the middle of the cell. Anaphase 2. Spindle fibers pull the sister chromatids toward the opposite ends of the cell. Telophase 2. A nuclear membrane forms around each set of chromatids, which are now chromosomes. Cytokinesis takes place, forming 4 haploids. Advantages and disadvantages. Both sexual and asexual reproduction have advantages and disadvantages. In sexual reproduction, there's more genetic variation because the offspring gets genetic material from both parents. This variation provides the offspring with better chances of survival. Consider a population of sexually reproducing plants, some of which have disease-resistant genes. If a disease attacks the plants, the disease-resistant plants will survive and reproduce. The plants that doesn't have the genes will die. Without this variation in genes, the entire plant species would have died. Sexual reproduction has disadvantages too. For sexual reproduction to occur, the organisms need to become sexually mature, which takes time. They also need to find a mate for reproduction. Asexual reproduction is convenient because organisms can reproduce without finding mates. But genetic variation is low because there is only one parent. Drag the labels to the image. Each label can be used more than once. An adult fruit fly has 8 total chromosomes and reproduces sexually. Correctly identify the parts of the diagram to show how a fruit fly reproduces.
So 4 chromosomes and 4 chromosomes, 4 for the egg, 4 for the sperm. They form by meiosis. These two come together to make 8 chromosomes in what is called a zygote. And then the zygote the cells continue to reproduce through mitosis.
Open the notebook tool and review your answer to this question from the warm-up. Kevin has learned about planarians, which are a species of flatworm. Some of these worms have 2 methods of reproduction. A planarian can produce new offspring by splitting itself and growing new body parts on each portion. Or it can mate with another planarian to produce offspring. Kevin believes that both methods of reproduction will produce offspring that are genetically identical to the parent. Do you agree? Do you still agree that offspring born sexually can have the same genetic material? Can you improve your answer?
Don't you think it's amazing that organisms can reproduce in so many different ways? In my lab, a strawberry plant is sprouting flowers for pollination. Amazingly, it's also growing buds and runners from its stem to produce new plants. Over time, I'll have little strawberry plants. Some will be clones, and some will be genetically different. I'm so happy because I'm going to have a basket full of strawberries soon. I'll have a lot of work to do because I'll need to take care of many plants. I'm up for the challenge. Reproduction is the only way a species can generate offspring and pass on genetic information. The next time you look in a mirror, look at the characteristics you've inherited. See how different they are from those of your friends and even your family. Your friends and cousins all look different from you. These differences exist because you've inherited genetic information that's been combined over thousands of generations. The unique genetic combination that your parents passed on to you is what makes you truly one of a kind.
Congratulations, you've completed the tutorial on types of reproduction. Types of reproduction. Glossary. Mitosis, a type of cell division in which daughter cells end up with the same number and type of chromosomes as the parent cell. Gene, a unit of hereditary characteristics that are passed down from parent to offspring. Chromosome, a thread-like strand in the nucleus of a cell that contains genetic information. Asexual reproduction, reproduction that involves only one parent and results in offspring that is genetically identical to the parent. Binary fission, a type of asexual reproduction found in bacteria, other prokaryotes, and a few eukaryotes. Sexual reproduction, a type of reproduction in which there are two parents and the offspring is genetically different from each parent. Meiosis, a type of cell division in which daughter cells end up with half of the chromosomes of the parent cell. A gamete, a haploid male or female reproductive cell that forms a zygote. A zygote is a diploid cell that forms when two haploid gamete cells come together. Diploid, having two complete sets of chromosomes. Haploid, a cell that contains half of the total number of chromosomes. Objective. In this lesson, you will/did develop models to describe the similarities and differences between asexual and sexual reproduction. Cell division. Cell division, the process in which a cell divides to form new identical cells, helps maintain the constant number of cells in the body, helps with tissue growth, helps repair injured and worn out tissue. It also aids in reproduction. Mitosis. During mitosis, the genetic material of the cell divides in equal proportion to form two new cells. Oh, one moment, please. Let me pause this. Interphase. This phase consists of 3 stages. The G1 stage, a time of rapid growth and development. The S stage, cells start creating a copy of the genetic material called DNA. The G2 stage, cell makes copies of all its organelles. Prophase. The first step in mitosis. DNA now takes the coiled form of chromosomes. They are condensed into chromatids. The nuclear membrane breaks. Oops. Let's fix this. It's not interphase fibers. It is spindle. Spindle fibers form in the cytoplasm. Metaphase. Chromosomes align in the middle of the cell on the spindle fiber. Anaphase. Spindle fibers pull apart the chromatids. Each half of the chromatid goes into the budding daughter cell. Telophase. Nuclear membranes form around the newly separated chromatid. Chromosomes relax and form chromatin fibers. Spindle fibers disappear. The nuclei of the daughter cells start to develop. Cytokinesis. The membrane that covers the cell and the cytoplasm divides into two. Animal cells, the plasma membrane pinches down the middle of the cell. Plant cells, a cell wall is formed in the middle of the dividing cells. Asexual reproduction. The single parent copies its genetic material and transfers it to the offspring. The offspring is genetically identical to the parent. Mitosis and binary fission. All eukaryotic organisms, whether single-celled or multi-celled, undergo mitosis. Bacteria are prokaryotes, which lack nuclei. Bacteria reproduce through binary fission. The bacterium copies its DNA. It elongates, that means gets longer, and pulls the DNA copies toward the opposite ends of the cell. The cell membrane then pinches in, forming two new cells. Vegetative reproduction. Gardeners cut a leaf or stem from an existing plant and put it in soil or water. They also usually add a growth hormone to encourage roots to start to grow. This leaf or stem grows into a new plant. Some plants, such as strawberry plants, produce runners that grow along the ground. These runners eventually produce new plants. Budding and regeneration. Budding. Some animals, such as hydras, reproduce by growing buds on their bodies. Their bud bodies, I don't know. When the new hydra grows to a size that can survive on its own, it breaks off from the parent hydra. Regeneration. Some organisms are capable of regrowing certain body parts. Example, a lizard can regrow a lost tail. Certain organisms can reproduce through regeneration. These organisms form offspring by breaking off a limb or splitting into half. Sexual reproduction. It involves two parents creating an offspring. So think of asexual as alone and sexual reproduction as two parents, with an S at the end, I don't know. Creating an offspring. When a bee pollinates a flower, it is helping the plant with sexual reproduction. The bee brings pollen, which contains sperm, to the female parts of the flower that contain the egg. Meiosis. The germ cell, a cell that makes sperm and eggs, copies its genetic material. It splits into 4 identical sperm or eggs, also called gamete cells. Each gamete contains half the genetic material of the parent cell. Sexual reproduction requires 2 parents, a male that provides a sperm and a female that provides an egg. 2 gamete cells combine to form a zygote, with the exact number of chromosomes for that particular species. For example, humans have 46 chromosomes in the germ cell. Each sperm cell and each egg cell has 23 chromosomes. When they combine to form a zygote, the zygote will have 46 chromosomes. Many of the phases in meiosis are similar to the phases in mitosis. Mitosis. The nucleus and cytoplasm divides once, resulting in the production of diploid cells. The same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. This is called 2N cells. There are two divisions, meiosis. There are two divisions, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, and involves the formation of haploid cells. Half the number of chromosomes as a parent cell. This is N cells. So there are advantages and disadvantages. Sexual reproduction, the advantages are that there is more genetic variation, which provides the offspring better chances of survival. The disadvantages, the organisms need to become sexually mature, which takes time. They also need to find a mate. Asexual reproduction, advantages, is convenient because organisms can reproduce without finding mates. Asexual reproduction, disadvantages, genetic variation is low because there is only one parent. All right, as you saw in the lesson, some organisms, such as Planaria and strawberry plants, are capable of both sexual and asexual reproduction. I think I read those backwards. Under what environmental conditions do you think asexual reproduction would provide a greater benefit? Under what conditions would sexual reproduction have a greater benefit? Answer that question. All right, wonderful. I hope this was a great and exciting lesson. Make sure you utilize your notes as you take the test.